The shroud of the lightless is immeasurably ancient, stemming from a time when none but the lightless prevailed. Repugnant creatures who infested Prospero's domain with their wickedness.
I didn't think I'd get this far. So welcome, friends. Relic of the Pact Abyss variant. First off, this build costs 10 divines and it will not help you kill Uber bosses. I have a small caveat about that at the end of the video, but let's get started with what buttons we're pressing. Our main skill, granted to us by Relic of the Pact, is Blood Sacrament. It's a channel that reserves HP, but when you let it go, or if it can't reserve anymore, it explodes. So it's like Flame Blast, but bloodier. Unlike Flame Blast, however, the damage isn't dictated by stages. It's 80% more damage for every 10 life you reserve. So if you reserve 96% of 14,000 HP, that's 1300 HP reserved, or 107,000 more hit damage. Which is, if you're coming from Diablo 3, sounds kinda okay, but here, that's absolutely insane. So what's the catch? Well, two things. When you reserve 96% of your HP, you stop having a build with 14k HP and have about 300, and are always one tap away from death. So to solve the problem of reserving too much HP, I've geared the build to reserve HP in 24% increments. One tap will deal 1 million damage, while only reserving 3,500 life. Now this has drawbacks compared to our traditional method, which is to use Essence Worm to make the skill 80% worse at reservation. That allows you to reserve 78% of your HP and detonate every time you cast the skill, since you cast it once, reserve your HP, and then the second cast would fail, detonating the skill. For me though, I end up taking more than 22% of my HP in damage, which prevents me from casting. So my 24% version lets me cast right up until I'm about to actually die.
I forgot to add this when I was making the video, but Astral Projector is super helpful. Blood Sacrament is a Nova, and it allows you to cast Novas anywhere. Please like and subscribe.
The second catch is the base damage. Base Blood Sacrament does 21 to 32 physical damage, which, when you apply the more damage, and no increases, ends up being 22k min hit, which is okay, but we can do so much better. Or well, we have to do better without added spell damage. Blood Sacrament has an added damage multiplier of 3%. The best, and generally cheapest way to scale damage, is to get healthier. So how are we doing that? The first step is Dissolution of the Flesh. There are a ton of gameplay implications with picking this jewel. First, you really need to get used to how it plays. Any damage is taken from your maximum health rather than your red health. So when you reserve more than 100% of your HP, you die. If you wait 2 seconds though, the damage is cleared. So that's an obvious solved problem, just pop your pally bubble and start hearthing. But wait, damage over time. With Dissolution, dots are a killer. People with more money and sense than me have picked up Cannot Be Poisoned on their boots, and taken the God passive for Immune to Burning Ground. This leaves Desecrated Ground, which you might as well re-roll, and then the big three: Bleed, Corrupting Blood, and Ignite. These three can be solved by Flask, but most anti-ailment flasks are super short. I have an Abyss Jewel with no Corrupting Blood, and Ignites don't last long because of my boots' reduced ailment duration, plus Aberrant's 60% less duration, so they end up lasting so short I can only pick them up when I watch back footage. But yeah, 30% more life, and then we pick up the 10% more life on the tree by grabbing every life mastery. Also, Wrathbit's Gloves gives us 10% max life, and 5% spell damage per 100 max life, putting it at a 700% increased spell damage with 14k life. So wait, why does this build have 22 Abyss Jewels? Well buddy, check this out. Every Abyss Jewel can roll a maximum of 40 life and 16 strength. Sometimes you get lucky and get 10 strength as an extra stat, but let's be reasonable and assume my 22 jewels have a minimum of 30 life. That's 660 HP. Now Shroud of the Lightless, 3% max life per Abyss Jewel, 66% increase in max life. Crazy. So that explains their life numbers, but do you hear that?
The first ones look upon this capture with pride, exile. You hunt well.
Why does it sound like every enemy dies shattered? Well, that's because the next king of our build, our Hat. Light Poacher's effect is, every time you kill an enemy, you gain a spirit charge. The max is the number of Abyss Jewels you have. For each Abyss Jewel, gain 5% of Fizz as extra fire, cold, and lightning. We're not just doing big Fizz hits, we're doing Tri-Element. Now I know what you're thinking, but don't worry. Shroud of the Lightless has you covered. 4% Elemental Pen per Abyss Jewel. 88% Ele Pen. Monsters genuinely don't stand a chance. So this build looks cool, and it's one hell of a gambler. You bet percents of your HP to see if you can one-shot a monster, and if you're right, free spirit charge. And if you're wrong, well, it's time to talk about the drawbacks of the build. First of all, in order to boss with this build, you have to take the worm node on the tree and show up to fights with 4 worm flasks. This keeps your kills up forever, but it's very much not a thing good builds do. I tried a variant where I wore Hymn Sorrows and converted my Fizz to cold, but I barely did more damage. So if you really want to kill bosses, you gotta bring the worms. Also, Socket Star. We give up 8 sockets on our gear for Abyss Jewels, so naturally we can only run a few auras, a support skill, a movement skill, and if you want to support your hat with damage supports for fun. Oh, and I'd like to take this time to highlight that you can drain your mana with Agnostic in order to never have the mana to cast Archmage supported Spirit Barrage. But frankly, I'd rather go with the worms over this. Oh, more charge facts. If you have increased charge duration node on your tree, it does double the duration of the spirit charges. Very good. Oh yeah, I know these guys have already posted their comments or gone back to delete them, but no recovery on this build matters. Defiance of Destiny? Shit, garbage, dude. You don't even need to recover any health. Disillusion takes it from the top, not the red middle bit. Look at these zombies, I have basically no HP, spamming my skills so Rapith keeps removing 10% of my HP, and they'll never kill me until the reservation hits the bottom. Also, Bubonic Trail is insanely expensive. I use it because it lets me stay dripped out of my mind, but I highly recommend you buy a rare boot with max life, +1 abyssal socket, and movement speed. You can even craft one yourself with fossils. See, the computer says it'll take 3,200 chaos. Alright, might be cheaper to go with the Bubonic Trail. Speaking of bad news, you'll really want to use the Honor Tattoos of the Oak. 2% life is strong, even when replacing the strength nodes on the tree. That does make the cost of this build infinite, so take that as you will. And last, make sure to use a duration skill like Void Spear as a Sorcerer life tap. It took me embarrassingly long to notice that the less duration support plus the less duration on Lightning Warp was affecting my life tap duration. Oh, I didn't tell you the supports for Relic of the Pact. It's Second Wind, Arrogance, Life Tap. Arrogance, by the way, needs to be level 13 if you don't have 10% life reservation efficiency. Somehow, my life reservation efficiency ring has tier 1 life and perfect resist so I can use Wise Oak working across all 3 resists. I am very lucky. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, ask me. Remember, this costs 10 divines and can't do Ubers, so don't be surprised when Cirrus smacks you into a million pieces.